Welcome back, everyone. This is Lack of Lepers. Thanks for joining me again. We're going to continue. Excuse me. That's why I haven't been around for a while. I've had a bad cold, and other things are happening in the life. My wife is going to give birth to our son any day now. So I've been nesting, and everything seems to be set. So we're just kind of hurrying up and waiting and cruising until the moment arrives. So we're going to get back to where we left off about the 40-minute mark of this Creative Stuff podcast, episode 12 with DJ Cactus. Let's go.
Huge article, and it's presented in a way that is...
We're talking about SCP 6500, which we already talked about, so I'll resist.
Like, the work that went into it is, honestly, kind of insane. And the...
That is a good word for it, though.
Like those
insane.
early articles, like this bit neatly within the bonds of that first...
what does that sound like? It sounds like...
No.
Y'all ever play Enderall, which is like a Skyrim fan mod? It's like a totally different game. Enderall, Enderal. That really sounds like that. This is the music that plays when you open up 6500, which does want to be a video game when it grows up.
Not even remotely, but is it very, very cool? Yes, it's extremely cool.
That's all that matters, by the way.
Sometimes within this,
we'll hear this over and over again. The philosophy of cool. That's really it.
Community kind of get hung up on the idea of articles being, a certain way, and I think it is more important, especially when you are talking about, writing for an audience, that you have to remember you are trying to entertain people, right? Like you're.
So this is in direct opposition to my philosophy and really other people's, more notable people's philosophies, particularly Randomini, who they're just talking about and who has a subsequent episode on this very podcast. And he goes on to say that he basically, thinks the point of writing is that it's not a competition, is that everybody has art inside of them, and that when you write, obviously you have an audience, otherwise you wouldn't be writing, but to overemphasize that audience confuses the real configuration of what is supposed to be happening here, which is that you're supposed to be expressing yourself as an artist. And people like DJ Cactus, and he goes on to expound upon this quite heavily. As we'll see, it's just the total opposite for them. All they care about is just the outward show and the validation from external people.
You're trying to do something creative in a way that provides a benefit to an audience. And
it's couched. See, this is how you know it's dishonest. Is that this obsession with other people's reception is couched in the ideology, disingenuously, might I add, of it being for other people. DJ Cactus here is trying his hardest to cloak his own self worship, in the form of upvote reception, in the idea that he's this public servant who's giving to other people by posting something that he wrote and hoarding upvotes and lording them over other people in the way that he's known for, that is somehow benefiting other people. And it's just an ideological trash fire, attempting to play this off as anything but.
My money, it is, if I think I can do that more effectively with a story that doesn't fit within the boundaries of the format, then I don't give a shit about the format.
So this is astounding because later in this podcast, I don't think we've gotten to it quite yet. It's about to come up. But DJ Cactus laments about his philosophical approach to containment fiction and what he's essentially been doing for the last 5 years, something like that. And he notes how strongly he understands now that the attitude of approaching it from a perspective of upvote totals, of quantitative metrics, is unhealthy. And he goes into this quite a lot. And yet, it's astounding that he still thinks this way, because this philosophy we just heard sort of spill out of his mouth like diarrhea from a prolapsed anus is why his mentality was so poor. And it's astounding to me that he cannot make the connection. It's almost as though there's some cognitive dissonance that he chooses to emotionally pave over with, the expectation of being wise or something like that in noting this unhealthiness that he's had for such a long time, which, by the way, I called him out on in 2019, and he disagreed with me then, but apparently he agrees with me now. But yeah, it's astounding to have these two ideas in the brain at the same time and it not cause enough cognitive dissonance to check yourself when you're saying something like this. Just to make it very clear, the philosophy that you don't give a shit about the format, and it's all about what the audience is dictating to you in terms of what they want to see and what they think is acceptable, that right there is all you need to hear. That's somebody who doesn't respect what came before them. He doesn't respect the format, doesn't respect what got him to the point where he's now selfishly interested in harvesting social capital from this project and turning it really into a social media battery for himself and his self-esteem. This is somebody who doesn't have any respect for the genre. And it's why he has the unhealthy mentality that he has. And he's like a baby just waking up to the world, realizing that what he's been doing for the last 4 years or 5 years is entirely unhealthy, but he hasn't developed the cognitive and philosophical maturity to actually take that emotional direction and have it penetrate as deep as what this philosophy is that he just said. He might get there one day, but it's just there's no clear indication that he hasn't really thought very thoroughly about this.
Right. It is more important to me that I'm able to tell a story in a way that is cool and people like than it is that I tell a story in a way that fits within a certain set of rules. You know what I mean? Not to say that the rules don't have value, because the rules are effectively a restriction on fiction by forcing you into a certain kind of confine.
And by the way, I'm going to minimize, my commentary here because I wrote a blog post all about this and went into great detail. So I'll just put that in the description.
As you're working on creating a narrative, but the fighting against those rules and finding ways to be creative around them while still maintaining the general shape of those rules is one of the really cool things about writing here, because you always have to be doing that if you want to be pushing the envelope.
So this is what birthed Neo-Law Foundation. It's what turned the triumph, really, the creative triumph of SCP-4444 into the absolute abortion of an article that is SCP-5004, and really pushed the direction of the wiki, at least of this school of the wiki. You have some of the paragons of the wiki now deeply embedded in this school. People like Rounderhouse, and even people who you think might be immune. You expect maybe to see a little more emotional and compositional maturity from people like Tanhoney, who are now neck deep and steeped in this sort of Neo-Lol Foundation-ish, certainly Rounderhouse sort of mentality of approach. And it's when you don't have any, it's when you don't have any respect for the genre and for these rules that he's talking about. Because really, creativity is about boundaries. There's a myth that creativity is just endless freedom, endless, liberty and liberality, and what you can choose and what to do. But real creativity comes down to what restrictions you put on yourself, because that's the environmental pressure that forces you to be as creative as you can be. And when you overstep those bounds, that's fine. And then another thing to mention is that, I think I mentioned this in the last time, he's trying to play this off in another disingenuous way, saying that this approach of his, this philosophy of his, is the philosophy of the innovator. It is the philosophy of the avant-gardist who is interested in breaking all the rules, and trying to equate that with a artistically respectable and perennial effort, which is to find new ways to be creative. But no one is not doing that. You don't have to destroy a genre in order to innovate and push the boundary. You can, as I've said before, rip straight through the boundary and be in a completely different spot afterwards, only fooling yourself and maybe the people who are as dumb or dumber than you, as is the case when djkaktus starts a school of thought in the SCP, like Neo-Lol Foundation. But it doesn't mean that you're actually being innovative. It doesn't mean that you're being, trailblazing in a creative sense with the genre. It just means that you're a disrespectful prick who values upvotes more than artistic integrity.
And that's something that I really, really have enjoyed about being part of this whole thing.
I'm sure you have.
Yeah, it's definitely something I love about the wiki. It's just how things just keep evolving and progressing. Never stays the same.
Yeah, it really doesn't. I mean, if you look at an article written from when I first started back in 2014, how that looks, and that compared to how articles look now, in general, it is a night and day difference. I mean, and
it's a weird husk of what it used to be. It's sad, really, to see. I mean, this is there. What's scary to SCP about me and about something like the SCF is that they know that there is a larger demographic of people in the asteroid belt, let's say, of the fandom, the sort of remote gravitational sphere, that outweigh them and disagree with the direction that they've taken the SCP Wiki in. There are more people who would look at the SCP Wiki and go, what the hell happened here? Than there are people who are on board with what they're doing to it. And so they've tried their best. They've done their best to sort of villainize that and, mock and ridicule it into a shameful silence. But, and then they try to, once again, couch it in sort of political ideologies to make themselves feel virtuous, such as the case with RPC Authority. But, there's really a truer artistic motive, and that is to counter the just, unmitigated irrationality, the unmitigated authority that these people have granted themselves over the genre, and people trying to return to, a simpler artistic expression, and really get rid of the things that these people have included as a sort of invasive species. Once again, as djkaktus has made very, very clear in this podcast, was done for the sake of upvotes.
Either the writing is better or worse. I mean, people have a variety of different opinions about that. But I think in general, it can be said that our authors on the wiki now have a lot.
By the way, if your compositional compass is other people's brains and other people's anticipated reception of your ideas, that by definition makes you less creative. It makes you less original because you're constantly making compositional compromises with other people, and the more people who you consider in that compromise, the stupider your ideas get. By definition,
that they can use to tell a story the way they want to, and they have a lot more experience. There are a lot more examples of articles that are really, really good in the past on the wiki now than there were 7 years ago. So yeah, I mean the wiki has developed considerably since then, and the format has developed the same way.
Yeah, for sure. Also, I want to say real quick, I don't know if it came through or not, but I opened SCP 6500 on my computer just to look at it, and music started playing. I don't know if that came through.
I didn't hear it. But...
So let's just ask for a second, just to demonstrate how pants shittingly stupid this mentality and philosophy is that's taken hold at SCP. That is epitomized by djkaktus and things like SCP-6500, which is what they're still talking about. The old idea of having some fidelity, some respect and faithfulness to the initial motive of making this an immersive experience has been totally flipped on its head, to the point where now the inclusion of video game soundtrack music is taken to be an argument for immersion. And that's only possible when you have completely abandoned the idea that this is supposed to be some sort of pseudo cold and cruel bureaucratic establishment, that if you happened upon it, you might wonder if it was real or not, thanks to the talent and the suspension of disbelief. Not that anybody is fooled by that, but that's the game, okay? That's the game that you play. It's the same game that you play in a theater when you try to get people to forget that they're in a theater, that they're watching a play. That's what makes it really great. That's when it transcends itself. And so you have people like the authors of 6500, which are just an incestuous cluster of vile, orgiastic, self-masturbatory congratulations. And they think that adding video game music to it somehow is not a severe violation of just basic intelligence when it comes to the genre. I mean, when I think of the people who wrote 6500, I think of them doing it with knee pads and helmets on. That's how dumb I think they are.
Oh, dang it.
Yeah, I forgot. I always forget that there is music there, because in a lot of cases I have my browser muted. But yeah.
So once again, if you are dictated by what the audience wants, that means you can't really keep a genre intact, because you're essentially capitulating perpetually to match the trend of the month. You know, you're a compositional whore. You are an authorial slut, and that's what I think djkaktus is, and I think that's what the authors of 6500 are.
Yes, that man, if you have not had the opportunity to, audience, you should go read SCP-6500. It's very, very cool.
We'll definitely have to as well. Sounds.
Now, it's not badly written. These are talented authors. I mean, their actual composition is fine. If this was a video game, you know, which once again it's desperately trying to be. It's trying as hard as it possibly can be to be a video game, while still having the SCP logo and title on it, so that they can get the upvotes that they can't get anywhere else from it. You know, I mean, it wouldn't be a bad video game.
Super cool. Just looking at the format is so neat. Sorry about the noise. Didn't realize it could be music. But yeah, if you're wondering what those three notes were, that's what that was. Yeah, super cool.
The music isn't even bad. I mean, like I just complimented it by comparing it to Enderall. That's a really astounding achievement of a game. I mean, look, I'm not, you know, I'm not so cynical as to not understand the quality that you can argue for in something like that. My greater point is that you know, you've imported an invasive species. You've morphed the genre, replaced authors with TikTok influencers and SCP articles with video games.
Big list.
Very cool.
All right. Welcome back to the Great Stuff Podcast. Wait, why am I saying that? Welcome back to the second part of this episode of the Great Stuff Podcast.
No time has passed between the first section and this second section.
I think what I think djkaktus should do, you know, I mean, you know, I don't like the guy, clearly, philosophically. I don't have anything against him personally. You know, I mean, I would help him, you know, just like I would help anybody in real life, you know. You know, it's not that. Let's not be children about this. Let's be adults about this. It's purely philosophical. And, you know, I wish him the best. I know he's trying to make money now. I think he is making money now from his writing on SCP, which is great. You know, I encourage that. Some people don't like that. I say more power to you. But if that doesn't work out for him, you know, I really think he should be a voice actor. I think especially in this part of this right here, he has such a good voice, nice baritone, and he really can push a lot of projection through those lungs, and we'll see that here. And yeah, I mean, he would be an excellent voice actor, whether through, you know, a video game or, you know, a cartoon or something like that. I mean, he's got talent there that I think is untapped.
No,
it's
time.
been like 5 minutes. 5 minutes,
yes,
maybe.
5 minutes. I stepped out of the room and then came back.
That's being generous. That's being generous.
It certainly has not been a month.
No, definitely not. That hasn't been an extremely long length of time. Definitely not. I definitely have not recorded other episodes of this podcast between these two parts.
No, of course not. Why would that be a thing that would ever happen? My schedule is perfect and has no faults.
Okay.
Hello,
well, I will
Shawn.
say, actually. What'd you say?
I said, hello, Shawn.
Hello.
You know, I'm just going to interrupt because they're kind of talking about nothing, shooting the shit here. But, you know, it's easy and perhaps a little cliche what I say, especially in this podcast, where it's like, okay, so you've basically, like, you don't respect the genre and stuff. But it's really hard to not believe that at the same time. Just when you see things like what we've just talked about, 6500 and beyond, of course, and you hear so explicitly from someone like djkaktus, who really has at least one hand on the steering wheel of SCP and has for the last few years, say something like what he said. You know, basically you have people who aren't capable of sitting down face to face with I think the more pressing, you know, aspects intelligence wise of what they're doing.
Cactus. I will say, I actually meant to tell you this before I started recording, but I'll tell you now on air, why not? I actually interviewed Random and I for this podcast.
Random and I.
Oh yeah. He had a question he wanted me to ask you actually. That's how I think I'm gonna start the second half.
That's horrifying.
It is horrifying.
Okay.
The entire interview was really, but you know.
Yes, it's I did a show with him one time. I shouldn't say I did a show with him. He did a show to me.
It's a good show.
Ago, called The Thing Randomized.
It's actually very entertaining.
Correct.
I
And
know all about it.
it was one of the more transformative experiences of my life. I didn't realize up until that point truly how much fear a single human can endure all at once, and it really opened my eyes, honestly. All right,
He's gonna love hearing that.
What did he want to know?
He wanted to know when the second season of How to Pronounce Randomized
My
Names is
gosh.
coming out.
We've only gotten
God.
like
Oh,
6
God.
minutes
Oh,
in.
God.
Man,
Oh God, not again.
I gotta stop talking. Are we still
I
on
don't know if I
one
can-
and a
I
half?
don't know if I can do it again.
We are.
My bones are still so fragile from
djkaktus's voice still sounds deep on 1.5 speed. That's crazy.
from the old days. Oh my gosh.
Oh god. Well, listener, this episode is going to come out before that one because it feels like a more natural progression.
Oh.
But you get excited to hear that. It might come out like a week after this one, I think.
A more
I'm gonna
natural,
try and release these,
a more natural
release these 1 week after the other.
descent into chaos for sure.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Exactly. That interview. It was
Snowing
interesting.
here.
Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I imagine
I got
it was.
plants inside. You can see one behind
All
me.
right, let's get into it.
Gotta wait
Yeah.
till the frost ends
Okay,
to plant
so-
these guys.
What elements do you think an SCP article or tale needs to be considered a great article within the context of the wiki?
I think the biggest thing is that you need to be kind of like realistic about what you're trying to accomplish. One of the things I see most frequently that people run into issues with when they're trying to create something big or something that is like, somebody sits down and says, I'm going to write my...
So DJ Cactus is about to go into why and how his approach to the wiki has been so unhealthy. And I just want to pause and once again, just keep in the back of your mind what he said about just like a minute ago, basically, about how, if he can get more, audience benefit from his writing, if it means that he can shit on the actual genre, and the actual project and what it is, then he'll do it. Just keep that in mind as he talks about this.
My masterpiece.
It's astounding. Astounding that somebody can fit this into
they're approaching it the wrong
one
way,
space
right?
in their
I
head.
don't think you should ever sit down and try to write great articles, or try and write. I should say not great articles. Every article should be great, but try and write like bangers, right? Like, oh, this is going to be the next big viral thing. I don't feel like that's the approach you should try and have. I feel like a much healthier approach to that sort of
No
thing
words.
is just trying to create like a cohesive narrative that is narratively interesting, right? Like there are a lot of different factors that play into that, and it's subjective.
Yeah, because if you didn't, if DJ Cactus actually walked the walk of what he's talking about here, because he doesn't do this. I mean, to an extent, he's genuine here because, for a long time he wrote just in the hopes of getting, the article with the most upvotes for that month, let's say. But he in practice, it's easy to say these things for him, but in practice, he doesn't follow through with what he's talking. He doesn't walk the walk. He talks the talk. And he's already told us why it is that's hard for him to do. And why that's the case is because it would be harder to get upvotes if you didn't. If you listen to yourself, if you say, okay, well, I know that my article has to be at a minimum somewhat entertaining to this audience that is going to see it, but that's the extent. I'm going to minimize that capitulation to them, and I'm going to work from just myself and what I artistically, genuinely want to express. It's a lot harder to get a lot of upvotes that way because you're not pandering to people's lowest common denominator aesthetics, the aesthetics of a 15 to 19-year-old demographic, which DJ Cactus has mastered and then felt himself to be an excellent author because of. All right, we got about 10 minutes through. We'll stop it here and do another video soon. Thanks.